So we didn't die last night.
We didn't die!
Yay!
Yes!
So
Yeah.
today
we
are on our way, or we went to
yes.
Sequoia National Forest.
Yes, it was amazing.
It was amazing.
But before that, we woke up and went downstairs, and it's one of those like continental breakfast places that has their own waffle iron. Yep, the flippy waffle iron.
Scoop your dough, pour it in. Mine went just fine. I didn't have any problems. I had a wonderful waffle, and then it was John's turn to try.
I had an awful waffle.
You did have an awful waffle.
Awful waffle.
What's funny is you even told me, I was like, oh, this is cool. And you're like, oh, you haven't used these before?
Yeah.
And so I expected him to be the pro, and he kind of sucked at it. But,
yeah, I think it was beginner's luck.
Oh, okay. Yeah, beginner's luck.
Yeah.
Maybe, not just a general understanding of how simple,
I think I overcomplicated it. I thought I was going to get fancy. I was going to preheat the waffle iron and make it. Yeah, it didn't work.
Yeah,
but I ate it anyway.
So we had awesome waffles, and then we hit the road, hit Sequoia.
We had a good distance to travel, and Sequoia, like all of these other parks we visited, are huge.
Yeah,
and massive. We had a limited amount of time because we were staying with Catherine and Matt, which we'll talk about a little later. So we knew we needed to get to San Francisco,
which was a good. It was probably 4 or 5 hours
at least.
Yeah, from Sequoia. So we knew that we only had a certain amount of the day that we could spend there. So we were looking at all the attractions, and I think we decided ultimately we were going to do Morrow Rock, which is amazing. It's like I would say it's kind of like a mini Angel's Landing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And we even talked about that while we were on top of it. But
yeah. And then General Sherman. So we decided those were the two we were going to do. But it's interesting because as you're driving through, you're expecting to start seeing these giant trees, and you really don't. You just don't see them, and you see these trees up on the tops of the mountains, and you don't get an idea for scale, and you're not seeing these massive trees. So we're kind of like, okay, maybe there's only 4 of these big trees.
Well, and that's when I started thinking, like, maybe I'm confusing, like, the Great Redwood Forest of Northern California with Sequoia National Forest.
Right. Which often happens. A lot of people do get the two confused. If they've done the Redwoods, they think they've done Sequoia National Forest, and they're different. Fun fact, not one of our questions necessarily, but they're actually both of the... I'm going to get this wrong, but they're of the same... genus of tree. So they actually both kind of start with Sequoia something or other, but they're slightly different. So they are technically both of the Sequoia family.
Okay, yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But
that's
when
cool.
When people refer to the Sequoias, they're referring to the trees from Sequoia National Forest, which is a different family of tree. So
that makes sense.
But
it was a pretty steep climb.
It was.
We recorded another time-lapse video, which I have yet to edit.
Link in the description.
Yeah, link in the description.
Once we have it.
Once I put it together.
This may get posted before that. But
that's got to get posted before that.
Yeah, all right. Well, link in the description at some point.
In a couple weeks.
But it was interesting because I think the first tree that we saw that was just like, oh my God, huge, was, no joke, as we park in the parking lot, it's directly in front of us. Massive. And I mean, to the point where people are getting out of their cars to go to the visitor center.
Yeah.
And everyone's stopping at this tree.
And we'd seen big trees leading up to that point.
Right. You think you're seeing big trees.
Oh, okay. Yeah. These are big trees, and like the roads are going around them and stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
this was no joke. No joke big. I mean, you can't help but just be in awe of the size. So that was the first large tree that we saw. And then there's another one right outside the visitor center.
Yeah.
And the cool thing they do at the visitor center is they have this massive tree, and then right on the walkway in front of the visitor center is this outlined in the walkway. It kind of shows you, okay, you're now standing. If one part is the bottom,
right,
you walk further down the path, and they're like, now you're at 80 feet, and you can see the exact width of the tree, and it kind of puts it into perspective.
Right.
It's still hard to understand.
Well, and it's like at the beginning of the walkway, it's like 25 feet across, and they say this is the base of the tree, and you're just like,
it's hard to fathom. And you're looking at the tree, and it still doesn't look that big.
And it's just huge.
It's pretty crazy.
Your sense of scale is completely. That was really cool. I forgot about that.
Yeah, it was a cool way to get an idea of how big these trees were. And it's not even in the top, 5 trees in the forest, but it's massive.
It's giant. But that was a really cool exhibit that we went into because it talked about the need for these wildfires that come through and how the sequoias themselves have developed to survive and withstand these wildfires because those trees live like 3,000 years.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, so thousands of years old, but they have 3 main layers or defenses when it comes to fire specifically. So the bark itself can be...
It's massive.
But it was like a foot
thick,
right?
It's massive.
I can't remember the exact depth of the bark, but it is insanely thick.
Yeah.
And then past that, there's another layer
that's fire resistant.
Fire resistant, and I think it was due to the moisture in that layer or something. And then inside that is what we would consider to be the tree, where the rings are and all of that.
And that section itself, it's the way that it's developed, it's harder than your other stereotypical trees, and so that core kind of is what keeps the tree alive.
Right.
So, and we got to see some of that when we were walking to Morrow Rock.
Right.
Because we made the decision, it was like a 3-mile hike there, wasn't it?
It was about 3 miles there. But there was a shuttle we could just take, but we wanted to see as much of the park as possible, and since we knew we were going to only hit a couple of locations, why not walk it, So,
and we had time. We were like, we can walk this 3 miles because there's not a lot of elevation gain.
Right.
Like, we can do that within an hour, see Morrow Rock, come back within an hour, which was the plan.
And I'm really glad we did that because we saw lots of cool things along the way. In fact, most of our questions for the day came from that walk. So we saw all sorts of interesting things, but in the visitor center, they talk about, the need for these wildfires, but they actually do controlled burning year round. So they'll pick a section. Basically
it was the college student that we kept blaming for things.
Oh, Chad.
Chad
was just wreaking
Chad.
So
Chad.
We developed the intern, this college intern, who was just burning things unnecessarily. But it turns out it's actually very, very necessary. What happens is the forest floor becomes very acidic and very thick in needles and all sorts of other vegetation that the sequoia seeds don't cones. I think cones don't take root, and so they don't stand much of a chance.
Well, and they need the fire, so the cones themselves are really hard,
right?
And they need the fire and that heat to actually break the exterior of the cone, in order for the seeds to get to the ground in the first place,
right? So they do controlled burns, and so you'll actually see a lot of just within like 20 feet of the tree. Yeah. In this nice little circle, it'll be completely charred, and that's so it has the best chance of seeding another tree.
And the other thing that was related to my question of the day is they also, with the smaller trees and vegetation, those plants will take up the water that the sequoia actually needs to continue to survive.
Oh wow!
So the controlled burns,
the water source as well.
Yeah, those controlled burns are really necessary. But it was crazy because we got to see how we would approach this tree and it would be completely burnt and look almost hollow from this one side. You get to the other side, it looks fine. It's a living tree.
Yeah, it was really impressive.
It was nuts because we're like, there's no way that tree is living, and then you make it to the other side and you're like,
nope, totally
that's
fine.
A living tree.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So amazing walk. There were a couple of patches of just dense dragonflies.
Yeah.
I mean, just hundreds of dragonflies in one little location. And it was funny, there were a couple of times where we were like, oh, we gotta get a picture of this. And the second John would take his camera out, they disappeared. They would just be gone. And then he'd put his camera away, and within about 30 seconds to a minute, they'd come back. And then we'd be like, this is so cool, take a picture. And they're gone. So, I don't know
how they know.
Yeah.
They know, though. We also got to see a couple deer.
Yeah, a couple. It was pretty awesome.
And
lots of wildlife, actually.
Birds.
Yep.
A really loud squirrel.
Very loud squirrel. But the very, very colorful birds. In fact, the most colorful on the entire trip.
Yeah.
As far as I can remember.
Yeah.
Very colorful.
Black and yellow. Yep. Very blue. We saw a couple of very blue ones.
Yeah.
Really cool. Morrow Rock was really impressive. We made it all the way up there. There were a lot of tourists there, and the way to get up there is very narrow. Yeah. Nothing like what we did at Zion.
No, but it was like a good baby version.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There were still points where you are, uh, you're on. Basically, you're hugging a rock to the right side of you, and then on the left side of the trail, it's just nothing but cliff.
But
nothing quite to the point where they were like hand over hand chains.
And here they
or
always
anything.
had a fence or a rail on the other side that would
Right.
keep you from falling
Basically
off.
just a false sense of security. Really, is what that is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But
So,
it was really cool. We got up to the top, and you get this 270-degree view.
Yeah, a great panorama.
Mhm.
And it, again, just gives you an idea of scale. You don't realize how high up you are until there's no trees around you. So it was pretty impressive. Lots of fun little groups that we met
Yeah.
up there. There's one group that I have a bone to pick with. There was this French couple up on the rock, and they were clearly posing for a picture and trying to get their picture taken, and
Like doing with the selfie. They were
Yeah.
trying to do it themselves.
and I was like, would you like us to take your picture? No, thank you, no. Didn't want their picture taken, or at least not for someone
No, they
else
just
to take
didn't want
their
their
picture.
they just didn't want their picture taken.
Yeah, and so I would say maybe 30
And
seconds.
we
40
took like one other family's, maybe a couple other families,
Yeah.
or couples pictures.
Within a couple of minutes, another French couple came up, and they started talking, and the French couple that denied our help immediately asked the other French couple if they would take their picture. And it's like, oh, please. And they're like, oh, yes, of course. And we were like, well, fine. Okay, we're not good enough.
It was crazy.
It was pretty funny.
It was really funny.
Good chuckle. Met a lovely couple who was also doing kind of a national park tour as well.
Mhm.
They were hitting a bunch of the same spots. So it was cool. It was just
It was really cool.
yeah, it was really cool.
Then we pretty much hustled back through.
Yeah.
We hustled back because we
It was a
knew
fast
we were. And the majority of it was downhill.
Yeah.
Because we knew we were on a time crunch. We still wanted to see General Sherman. We actually talked about maybe we shouldn't see General Sherman, but we're like, well, it's on the way.
It
And
was
literally
actually
was on the way.
So we did.
We stopped and saw it.
Yeah, we got Rockstar parking. Like
Right in front of the
people were
the path.
circling the parking lot, just hoping for and if you don't get a spot there, I mean, it's strictly like you cannot park on the roads. There's no shoulder. There's nowhere for you to pull off, and there was no parking within a mile if you weren't going to make it in this parking lot. And we made the choice to drive so that we didn't have to make the trip up on the shuttle, and then
Backtrack.
drive the same
And then
ride
drive
again.
past it on the way out. We didn't want to do that.
But if we didn't get a spot, we were going to be screwed.
We had talked about like, well, if we don't get a spot, we're gonna make one loop and then we're just gonna go.
We're going to go because we don't have time. And we got a spot, no joke. The only better parking spot would be if we had a handicap placard.
Yeah.
Because
we were that close to the trailhead.
we were right at the trail. It was amazing. And another cool thing on the walk to General Sherman was it's actually quite steep down.
Yeah.
A lot of switchbacks, but
it's about half
quite
a mile walk down to General Sherman.
Yeah, and relatively steep. But what was cool is at certain points on the path, it would say, you are now this high up the tree.
Like if you could see General Sherman.
If you could see General
you
Sherman.
couldn't because there are too many other trees in the way.
Right. You are now this high. And it just, again, it would say you're this high, and you're like, wow, that's really high. And then it would say, that's, 1/3 of the way up the tree, or whatever it was. It was massive.
Nuts.
So we finally made it.
We finally made it, and we had this realization. They have it kind of fenced off the bottom.
Yeah.
It's a big tree.
It's insane.
It's the biggest one that we saw.
Yeah.
But it's not...
Not the biggest.
It's not the tallest.
Not the tallest. And not the widest.
In circumference.
But...
It's the most massive.
The most massive. Literally massive. So it's thick from the bottom all the way to the top. And so just by mass, sheer volume, it is the most massive tree.
Or the heaviest tree in the park is...
Is it in the world?
way.
Do we know that? That wasn't one of our questions of the day, so
I don't
we won't be
know.
answering that. So
that's a good question.
Yeah.
If you know,
leave
a comment.
Leave a comment.
For all 18 of you who watch.
That's right, 18. Wow, we got 18 viewers.
For all 3 of you who watch.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. But it was cool.
It was cool. I would say it's a cool thing to say you have seen, but it was a bit touristy. It was a bit of a tourist trap, and there were, very long line of people competing to get the next selfie with the largest.
And they have
trees.
a big placard on the big ones like General Grant, General Sherman.
Right. there's a sign in front, and so that's the typical picture. If you Google General Sherman, you'll see that exact picture with the plaque and the tree. And it was a long line of people wanting to get their picture taken with the tree, and it felt a little touristy, but it was cool to say we did it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we did, because it is kind of a bucket, or check out the list kind of thing. So.
Well, and so what we decided to do, instead of us getting a picture in front of it, we went around, and so we just took a panorama of the tree. I think it's on your phone.
I have one on my phone, and I may have a complete set on my camera,
right.
So maybe I'll stitch one together, and we can take a look at that.
But then we drove north through Kings Canyon Road, which is a really cool drive, and I'm glad we did that, because the park ranger at the very first stop we asked her, like, we're going to go to San Francisco after this. She said the fastest way is to actually go back out of the park the way you came, and then head north on the highway. But I'm glad we didn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't going to tack on too much time, and anytime we could make the decision to take a scenic route, we chose that, because... I mean, especially once you hit a main highway, you're not really seeing anything that makes that state or that area unique. It's highways are highways. Yeah. So, we really tried to choose the smallest and most scenic route whenever we could.
And it was a really steep elevation climb, but it was beautiful. Yeah. We went through several other groves of these giant trees. Yep. Lots of camping grounds. Some really cool scenic bridges that we went over. Again, click on the link below. You'll be able to see that.
So it was beautiful driving for a couple of hours, but then we hit highway, and it was.
But before we left, we actually stopped at the gas station in the park.
Which was awesome, because that right in front of us as we pull up to get gas, and this is the only reason it's worth mentioning, was there was a gentleman driving a Toyota Sequoia in Sequoia National Forest, and I thought that was funny. So
that was good.
Go you! I don't know if you meant it. Or if it was intentional, but...
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So we went north, and really at this time, we're just trying to make it to San Francisco. We wanted to join Catherine and Matt for dinner, and we're really fighting time. We're realizing that it's going to be a late dinner at this point.
So we decide we're probably not going to eat until we see them, but, I was hungry, but... We decided food.
So we stopped to get gas, and so we've gotten gas, now we're pulling over, we're going to go in for drinks, and I go into the bathroom.
And I was just going to get some drinks, and I'm walking down the drink aisle, and right at the end of the drink aisle, and they have some of their inventory stacked in the corners. It was a really, really tight area, and then all of a sudden, if you just round around the stacks of drinks, there's this tiny little hole in the wall, literally a hole in the wall, Mexican restaurant, and not even full service restaurant. It was sketchy, but I wanted some tacos.
I didn't even make it back that far. It's it's the bookstore Never Ending Story.
Yes, yeah,
and it was kind of like that, where you can't really see where all the aisles are. I didn't even know that it was back there.
I found it by accident. I'll be honest. Right as I'm rounding the corner, I'm thinking, where's the employees only sign? And there wasn't one. So I kept going, and there was a little restaurant. It was really bizarre.
So I get out of the bathroom, and I'm headed towards the drink aisle, and Galen's distracting me with different drinks. Have you tried this drink?
Yeah.
Have you tried this drink? I'm really looking for a squirt with the natural sugar.
Yeah. Basically just buying time for my carne asada tacos to be made and have them shout out my order. So.
I didn't even know there was a restaurant back there. So I was let's
go.
Grab the Arnold Palmer that I'm always going to get, and then let's just get back in the car and let's move on. But
nope. So I got my order, and I got to the car, and I was like, do you want a carne asada taco? And John's like, no, we're not going to eat.
No, we talked about this. We're not going to eat until we get to San Francisco, and we're going to eat with Matt and Catherine.
So, okay, fine. You don't want tacos. That's great. But I wasn't going to eat 4 by myself. So I left 2, and I'm scarfing them down before we get on the road, and I think you finally decided, okay.
I was like, I'll just have one. I'll just have one. It's going to be 2.5 hours till we're there. I'll just have one.
But they were amazing.
They were really good.
He ended up eating both.
I ended up eating both.
It was fantastic. They were amazing. Have no idea what the restaurant was or what gas station it was attached to, but
I don't even know what city that was.
If you stumble upon it, you'll know because they were fantastic.
I think it just popped up magically for us, and then it disappeared.
Maybe. Yeah, probably it doesn't exist.
It doesn't actually exist.
Real.
But they were really, really good. But what kind of was confusing about that is the family that owned the gas station was definitely Middle Eastern of some kind.
Yeah, and then the restaurant was clearly family run,
right,
as well by a small Mexican family. So
I have no clue
Yeah.
how that works, but it was delicious.
Yeah, it was cool.
Anyway, so we finally make it into San Francisco. It's a lot later. We've already communicated to them that we're not going to have dinner with them.
You're forgetting the bridge.
I'm not forgetting the bridge.
Oh.
So as we're pulling into San Francisco, we approach from Oakland.
Yeah. So we're driving, and all of a sudden we start to hit a bridge, and
Which is cool.
which is cool.
It was a really nice
that's
bridge.
Cool. Bridges are bridges, and it was a very nice bridge.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden these signs start popping up saying toll.
No warning whatsoever.
It just came out of nowhere.
Even Google didn't warn us.
Yeah.
Usually Google warns us that
Google's
there's a toll
usually
coming.
pretty good. So all of a sudden these toll signs start popping up, and then the cash only signs start popping up, and we had emergency cash on hand, but we were not expecting.
This was not an emergency.
It was not an emergency, and it was exact change.
Right.
So if we had handed them a 20, which I think was probably the smallest.
Yeah, we only had 20s
So
as our
if we had
emergency
handed
cash.
a 20, there's a $20 toll, and you now drive away. They can't make change, and so we weren't happy about that.
No.
We weren't happy about having to pay the toll. Because,
No!
So this is okay. Get behind us on this, please. Let us know what you think down in the comments, because I feel like we've come to the conclusion that if you don't live in the state,
Right.
and you didn't vote for whatever project is being paid for by this toll, you should not have to pay that toll. I don't live in California.
And I generally vote for tolls for things, acknowledging that
Right.
I'm going to drive across 520 and I will pay that
It
toll.
benefits me, so
I will
therefore
get
I'm
that.
willing to pay for that.
Right.
We were just probably tired and curmudgeon-y.
Well,
But-
and we weren't expecting it.
No, we weren't expecting it. And all of a sudden we felt like we were in a really tight bind to try and make change for
Or fine
this.
chain. So Galen is the one driving at this point.
And I pick the most packed lane.
Smart.
I'm like, okay,
Very
that
smart.
one is going to take the longest because we're trying to. John is scrounging.
Like, so
for
now I'm like going
change.
through and I kind of stash change in my car exactly for reasons like this. Or if you're like driving through the fast food place like
Right.
the 3 times a year that I do that.
Yep.
You know, like, and you need the penny or whatever. So, like, I'm going through all of these places in my car, and I'm like, okay, $3.75, like, finally.
He finally made it to $4 right as the car in front of us drives past the toll and hands me the quarters. We pay it, and I was upset at having to pay the toll, but fine, take it. And then I think not even 30 seconds afterwards, you had talked about something. Well,
As we were driving away, I was like, oh, we should have gotten him to... Because I forgot. I read this statistic one time that people who work in toll booths have a really high rate of suicide because it's such a repetitive job. Everybody hates you.
everyone hates you.
Especially people from out of the
I
state
didn't
who
hate
didn't
them.
vote for
I just hated
the
the
project.
legislation and the fact that I was paying the toll.
And so I read the statistic once where if you can get them to say more than 3 unique words that aren't
Thank you.
hello,
Have a
thank
nice
you,
day.
have a nice day. If you can get them to say more than that, then it actually improves their quality of life and
Right, you're
improves
interacting with them, and
like a
Yeah.
real human.
yeah,
And so typically when I was on tour with Missoula, we would always say like, oh, hey, we're going to be here for the night. Where's your favorite place to eat? And that would be like, oh, well, what kind of food are you looking for? And it changes instead of just being like,
Yeah.
thank you, have a nice day. It
Yeah.
changes the interaction to being an engagement instead.
yeah. And I mean, we were kind, but there wasn't any conversation, so I felt bad. But if I ever hit a toll ever again,
But I also didn't warn you.
yeah,
so.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So we finally made it to Catherine and Matt's.
Which, I mean, we're like driving through downtown San Francisco to
Yeah.
get to their place. Like
Yeah.
we drive by the pier,
Yep, the wharf.
the wharf, and it's like, we're like, where are we headed?
Oh my gosh,
This is like,
it's Swanksville.
it's nice.
It's really nice.
If you need a place to stay in San Francisco.
Yeah, hit us up. We'll hit them up. Whatever we'll get you set up.
And you get your own little den, like you get your own room.
They're really well set up for guests, and they themselves will admit, they love hosting,
Mhm.
and they have the best setup for it.
And they had spring rolls for us.
Yeah,
She had gotten us spring rolls because she knew that we had eaten, but she knew that was like hours ago.
Right, and it probably wasn't a dinner-worthy meal.
No.
And so kind for her to have grabbed that for us, and I needed it. Like, it was perfect. And then we went out for ice cream, which was awesome.
So San Francisco has always been avant-garde.
Yes,
With
hipster. I'm gonna say it.
Hipster. They've
It's
always
hipster.
been hipster. very trendy, trend forward with their food. There's a lot of good food that has been in San Francisco for years. Will be in San Francisco for years. But one of the current trends is it liquid nitrogen ice cream?
Liquid nitrogen ice cream. So essentially, it had something to do with code, actually, which is weird because I feel like liquid nitrogen would be harder to get.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they didn't make the ice cream there. Something about the process. I don't know.
No, they make it in batches. Like, they don't store it. So
that's what it is. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
And so they have these unique little machines, and you have this huge vat of like liquid nitrogen,
giant container
above you. That it's like if that fell, like everybody in the restaurant would be dead. Like right now,
icicles,
like instantly frozen.
Yeah, and I'm sure, and there were giant I-beams underneath. Like they had clearly reinforced it, but it was still like, woo! It looks very industrial, kind of intimidating.
Yeah,
but when you order, if like say 3 of your party ordered the same ice cream, they'll make it in one batch. But otherwise, it is an individual serving, and they take the ingredients, the cream, and whatever's necessary for the ice cream, and they put it into this device where they mix it through the liquid nitrogen, or probably around it. I don't think the liquid nitrogen comes in contact.
I think it does. It does because it'll evaporate so quickly.
Okay, so not sure on the science on that.
No.
I don't know if liquid nitrogen is safe.
Alton Brown does.
Okay.
He'll do liquid nitrogen ice cream. And so does America's Test.
But it's like single batch ice cream, and it was fantastic.
So good.
It was so good.
The creamiest ice cream I've ever had.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, without getting into too much of the science, because we're just not going to get into the science. It's really creamy because the crystals are really small. That's all you need to know.
There you go. Small crystals, creamy ice cream.
Delicious. And it's not the next day yet, so we're not going to talk about that.
No. But
really set up. I slept really well that night.
Amazing way to end the day. It was really, really nice.
Really
nice,
fun.
Beautiful.
And Catherine and Matt are just wonderful people.
Yeah. Thanks again, guys. If you're watching this,
thank you.
Yeah. You couldn't have been more hospitable. It was amazing. Thank you again.
Questions of the day!
Yay, questions of the day!
This is a really long video.
It's a really long video. Thanks for not sticking around because you're not actually watching this right now. No one's watching this.
Okay, we only have 3 questions today. The first is...
what does Sequoia mean?
The second is, what is the health of the forest? Because to us it looked a little dry.
Yeah, it
didn't look healthy in parts.
In parts.
I mean, like, and then you would walk and you'd be like, oh wow, these are very vibrant.
Right.
Living
But
trees.
we wanted to know if that was a natural thing or if there was actually some sort of crises happening.
Yeah.
You know. But and then the third question was about these gourds. So that we saw in the
or we thought we saw gourds.
We thought we saw.
Anyway, we'll get to that.
So
what is the first question?
So the first question is, what does Sequoia mean? And it's kind of a disappointing answer. It comes from the scientific name for the tree.
Okay.
So the scientific name is Sequoia.
So it's not like a Native American thing at all?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the accepted definition is that it comes from the genus name of Sequoia dendron giganteum.
Okay.
Which is the type of tree.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the scientific name for the genus of tree. But there are unconfirmed speculation that the gentleman who named the tree actually named them with a gentleman whose name was George Guess, but also referred to as Sequoia. And he actually helped form the Cherokee alphabet.
Oh.
And so in the 1800s, so to help Americans communicate.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting.
Like Code Talkers. Like
I can't confirm that. I can't say.
Yeah. We didn't do that research.
He was part of just establishing an alphabet so that we could communicate.
Interesting.
But the long and short of it is, it very, very clearly spells out. No one knows that for sure.
Right.
There's no record of him telling anyone that. But there's that rather famous gentleman who had this Indian name of Sequoia.
Huh.
But otherwise, it is not documented. Sequoia does not, as far as we could find, or as far as I could find, does not mean anything.
Interesting.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
There you go.
And you're right. As we were doing the research, he's like, oh, this is kind of a boring answer. But it's still interesting.
Yeah, come from the scientific name, as far as we can confirm.
So I looked up the health.
Yeah,
according to the Washington Post, as well as Oregon Live, which is a parks-minded parks-minded,
like a community or
national. It's kind of a community.
Okay.
But according to both of them, the ecologists of the park system were actually really concerned because California went through and is still going through these years of drought.
Yeah, massive.
And so they were really, really concerned that potentially the trees themselves were at danger of dying. And the short answer is no, they're fine. And because they've been around for thousands of years, this is not the first time that they've experienced a drought.
Right.
And so they've been monitoring them, and as far as they can tell, there's really nothing wrong. And they actually, they were saying that what's a greater threat is when we don't allow these wildfires to come through.
Right.
And that's why they do the controlled burns.
Right.
But then on the national park site, which thank you for pointing that out to me, there are ozone levels that are kind of entrenching upon the edges of the forest. And if the ozone levels, like something about the nitrogen gets too high, it can actually start to change the genetic makeup of the tree. And that would then mess with their ability to defend against wildfires, to be resourceful and get water. They were saying that, and this is actually surprisingly little considering how big the trees are, each tree consumes about 800 gallons of water a day. And that all comes from like the natural aquifers.
That seems like a lot to me.
But considering how massive these trees are, these trees are like 300 feet tall.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're like huge.
Yeah, they're about this big. About this big.
There's a bit.
Yeah.
I know. I was like, they're this.
They're like
but
big.
They're like
you could like jog laps around them and get a good exercise. They're huge.
But yeah, so they actually are saying it looks like parts of it, but that's just the natural life cycle. Is that you're going to have a little area or two that looks dry and dead. What'll happen is that'll die, and another one will come.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it seems like the two or the bigger threat to them is probably more directly man-made. So
the levels of ozone that are encroaching on it.
Yeah. So
those aren't. That is a potential threat. It's listed as under the threat section, but it really is a potential threat. It's not.
Okay.
It's not impacting it yet, but
okay.
It very well
it's definitely
could.
A risk.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that brings us to the third question, which was about these gourds that we saw. So as we were walking to
we saw
Rock,
flowers.
So we.
Okay, sorry.
Come on. So we're walking to Morrow Rock, and we would walk through these marshy areas. Not like marshy, not terribly soft, but you could tell there was flowing water at some point because there were incredibly rich green bands of vegetation.
And like ferns. And ferns don't grow where it's dry.
Right, yeah. So the incredibly green vegetation, and in that we saw these flowers that looked dead on like a squash flower. So
those yellow
and I could have sworn that I saw the beginnings of a bulb, the beginnings of a gourd. And so we were convinced that there were these wild gourds. So our question of the day was like, wild gourds in Sequoia National Forest? What are they? Turns out we can't deny that they exist. We can't confirm it because we couldn't find enough information that said in either direction whether or not there really is.
And do you think it's fair to say that in our videos to date, we spent more time researching this one question than any of the other questions
so
that
we enacted, or I enacted, a new rule, which was basically competitive research because I could not find enough information. So I said, I need backup. Every other time, we've pretty much one person researches a question and the other person researches another, but we don't overlap. This was a time where I had to call for backup. And even with the two of us researching it at great length, we couldn't find enough information. So,
however, I did find the Sequoia Gourd Society.
Oh yeah.
So we have a suspicion
there's gourds around.
That there are gourds around the area, and their annual meeting, their annual convention is in Visalia, which is where we stayed last night. And that's so. There's gotta be gourds, but we just couldn't
confirm it. We don't want to say, oh, we totally saw them, but we can't confirm it. So
Galen found a pretty cool website where it lists thousands.
I think it's wildflowersearch.com. If that's correct, I'll put a link down in the bottom. But you can drop a pin on a location on basically a Google map, and then it tells you all of the wildflowers and vegetation in that area. And I scrolled, for no joke, probably 20 or 30 minutes on just plant life. It's like 12, images of plant life, and we couldn't find anything. It was.
I looked up 2 other. You looked at the national parks like flora list for Sequoia. I looked up 2 other local area and local botanist sites. Didn't find. So the Sequoia Gourd Society is our closest bet, but we don't know.
Maybe get a hold of them if you want to know.
Yeah.
More about the gourds in the area. So, well,
that's our day.
That was our day. Congratulations on the longest video we've recorded so far.
Yes.
And we thought this was going to be the shortest one because we didn't have that many questions.
And we could remember the day that well.
That's right.
Even though it
was
happened.
just last night.
Just happened.
I mean, yeah. So.
Good night.
Thanks.